I'm Amelia, 32, female, and at Thanksgiving dinner, my own family, led by my sister, took a formal vote to kick me out. They laughed and applauded as they did it, raising their glasses in a toast to my banishment. They had no idea I came prepared for their cruelty. They had no idea about the simple manila folder in my bag, a folder that held the power to turn their celebration into a festival of screams. My family has always operated on a strange and unspoken set of rules, rules that became clear to me only as I grew older. The primary rule was this: Megan, my older sister, was the sun, and the rest of us were minor planets expected to orbit her, providing warmth and light but never, ever casting a shadow. My parents, Carol and Richard, weren't just enforcers of this rule, they were its most devout followers. I wasn't the unfavored child so much as the forgotten one. A quiet, steady presence who was only noticed when I failed to perform my orbital duties correctly. The dynamic was cemented in 1,000 small cuts over the years. I remember when I was 16 and had saved up for months to buy a beautiful second-hand 10-speed bicycle. It was my prize, my freedom. I polished it every weekend and rode it everywhere. Around the same time, Megan, who had just gotten her driver's license, was given our dad's old sedan. Less than a month later, she crashed it, a silly accident involving a text message and a parking bollard. The front end was completely crumpled. There was no yelling, no grounding. My parents expressed their relief that she was okay and immediately started shopping for a brand new, safer car for her. A week later, my prized bicycle was stolen from our garage. When I cried, my father sighed with impatience. Emilia, it's a bike. You left the garage door open. What did you expect? It didn't matter that Megan was the last one to use the garage. It was my fault for owning something valuable and not guarding it with my life. Megan got a new car for her mistake. I got a lecture for my loss. Then there was college. Megan had her heart set on a private arts college 3 states away with a tuition that made my eyes water. My parents never flinched. They took out loans, dipped into their savings, and spoke with pride about giving their daughter the best possible start. For years later, when it was my turn, the family finances were suddenly a topic of grave concern. Money is tight right now, Emilia, my mother would say, wringing her hands. Your father's investments haven't done so well. I was a straight-A student and had my sights set on a state university's excellent accounting program. It was a fraction of the cost of Megan's school, but I was still encouraged to apply for every scholarship and loan I could find. It will build character, my dad said, clapping me on the shoulder. I worked 2 jobs through college, graduating with honors and a mountain of student debt. Megan graduated with a degree in art history and a portfolio of paintings she never touched again. My parents threw her a lavish graduation party. For me, they took me to a local steakhouse and told me how proud they were that I was so self-sufficient. But the moment that truly defined our relationship was the matter of our grandmother's necklace. Before she passed, Grandma Rose had taken me aside. She showed me a delicate gold locket on a fine chain. This was my mother's, she'd whispered, her voice thin as paper. It's for my first granddaughter who has a kind and steady heart. It's for you, Emilia. She passed away a few months later. At the reading of the will, there was no specific mention of the locket, only a general distribution of her personal effects. I waited patiently, assuming my mother would know of her mother's wish. A month later, Megan came over for dinner wearing the locket. It glittered against her skin as she laughed, her hand flying to her chest in a dramatic gesture. I felt the air leave my lungs. I looked at my mother, who just gave me a small, apologetic shrug from across the table. It just suited her so well, honey, she whispered to me later as I helped with the dishes, as if that explained everything. You know how things are. I did know. I knew that in the world my family had constructed, my desires were secondary, my accomplishments were footnotes, and my feelings were inconvenient. For years, I accepted it. I built my own life brick by quiet brick. I became a financial auditor, a job that suited my meticulous nature. I fell in love with a wonderful man, Leo, who saw me for who I was, not for who my family wanted me to be. I kept them at a polite distance, attending holidays and birthdays out of a sense of duty, a faint, lingering hope that one day they might see me. That hope had been dying a slow death for years. The past few months, however, had killed it completely. And as I drove to their house on Thanksgiving morning, the manila folder sitting innocently on the passenger seat, I knew that. This orbit I had been trapped in for 32 years was about to break spectacularly and irrevocably. I was no longer a forgotten planet. I was a meteor, and I was heading straight for their sun. The discovery happened by accident, as most life-altering discoveries do. It started with a piece of Mies-delivered mail. 3 months before Thanksgiving, I had been visiting my parents to help them with some tax paperwork. It was a yearly ritual. Despite my profession, they only ever asked for my help when numbers were involved, a tacit acknowledgement of my one approved of skill. As I was leaving, I noticed a letter on the hall table addressed to them, but from a bank I didn't recognize. What caught my eye was the stark, red-stamped phrase on the envelope, "Final Notice." "What's this?" I asked, holding it up. My mother, Carol, snatched it from my hand with a speed that surprised me. "Oh, nothing, dear, just junk mail," she said, her smile tight and unnatural. She quickly tucked it into a drawer, but I had seen the logo of a prominent mortgage lender and the panic in her eyes. I was an auditor. My entire career was built on noticing details that people tried to hide. That evening, I told my fiancé, Leo, about it. "It was just weird," I said, pacing our living room. "She was so desperate to hide it, and they've had the same mortgage with the same local bank for 30 years. Why would a different lender be sending them a final notice?" Leo, ever the pragmatist, put his arm around me. "It's probably nothing, Em, but if it's bothering you, it's okay to be concerned. They're your parents." But it was more than concern. It was a professional itch, a puzzle that my mind couldn't let go of. My parents owned their home outright years ago, or so they'd always claimed. The house was supposed to be their nest egg, the legacy they would one day pass on to Megan and me. That was the one promise of fairness I had always clung to. My job gave me access to certain public records databases. With a heavy heart and a sense of encroaching dread, I did a property records search on my parents' address. My blood ran cold. There it was in black and white, a second mortgage taken out 18 months ago. It wasn't for a small amount either. It was for a staggering sum, nearly 80% of the home's current market value. The lender was the same one from the letter. My hands trembled as I dug deeper. An auditor knows how to follow the money. It took me 2 weeks of discreet, careful searching, calling in a favor with a trusted colleague to access certain de-identified banking data, but I found the trail. The loan funds hadn't been used for home renovations or medical emergencies. They had been dispersed in a lump sum into a holding account, and then, over the next few months, transferred in large, regular installments directly into Megan's personal business account. I felt like I couldn't breathe. Megan's wildly successful real estate career, her new luxury SUV, her designer clothes, her lavish vacations, it was all a lie. A lie funded by the equity of the home my father had built and the security my mother cherished. A lie funded by my inheritance. The final soul-crushing blow came when I obtained the full loan application packet through a legal channel available to my firm. Buried deep within the 50-page document was a form titled Waiver of Inheritance Interest. It was a document the bank required because I was a legal heir to the property. It stated that I, Amelia Jansen, willingly and with full knowledge, waived any and all future claims to the property at that address. And at the bottom of the page, on the signature line, was my name. It wasn't my handwriting. It was a crude, almost childish forgery, an imitation of my signature that was just good enough to pass a cursory glance. I printed everything: the loan agreement, the transfer records, the pre-foreclosure notice I found online confirming they were months behind on payments, and finally the forgery. I stared at my forged name for a long time, the black ink a symbol of the deepest betrayal imaginable. They hadn't just taken my money, they had taken my name, my identity, and used it to erase me from my own family's story. I laid it all out for Leo that night. He was silent for a long time, his face a mask of cold fury. "Emilia," he said finally, his voice low and dangerous, "this isn't just a family dispute. This is a crime, forgery, fraud. They could go to jail." "I know," I whispered. "What do you want to do?" he asked, taking my hand. "We can go to the police right now." I shook my head. A part of me wanted to, but a bigger part knew that a legal battle would be messy, public, and in a way would still keep me tied to them. "No," I said, a strange, cold calm settling over me. "They did this in the dark, I think. I think the truth needs to come out in the light. I took all the documents and placed them in a simple manila folder. It felt thin and insignificant, yet it held the weight of my entire world. A week later, the Thanksgiving invitation arrived. It was a text from Megan. Hey, tea giving at mom and dad's 2 p.m. Be there, it's going to be a special one this year. Winking face. The winking emoji felt like a taunt. I knew then that this wasn't just a holiday dinner. It was a trap. They were planning something, the frantic effort to hide the letter, the secret financial dealings, and now a special Thanksgiving. It was all connected. They were going to do something to push me away, to justify their actions in their own minds. They were going to make me the villain so they could feel like the victims. I have to go, I told Leo. Are you sure? He asked, his eyes full of worry. You don't have to put yourself through that. Yes, I do, I said, my voice steady. I looked at the manila folder sitting on my desk. They're planning to write the end of the story. I think I should be there to read them the epilogue. Walking into my parents' house on Thanksgiving felt like stepping onto a stage. The air was thick with the scent of roasting turkey and a cloying, artificial cheerfulness. My sister, Megan, greeted me at the door, pulling me into a hug that felt both brittle and possessive. Emilia, you made it, she chirped, her voice an octave too high. We were just talking about you. Her husband, Mark, stood behind her, a smug grin plastered on his face. He was a man who had effortlessly assimilated into the family dynamic, recognizing early on that siding with Megan was the path of least resistance and greatest reward. He raised his glass of wine to me in a mock toast. To the guest of honor, he said, his eyes glinting with an irony I was not yet meant to understand. My parents were in the living room. My mother, Carol, fussed over the table settings, her movements jerky and anxious. My father, Richard, was glued to the football game on television, but his focus wasn't there. He kept glancing nervously from the TV to Megan, like an actor waiting for his cue. The entire atmosphere was wrong. The laughter was too loud, the compliments too effusive. Megan talked nonstop about a supposed huge deal she was closing, painting a picture of herself as a real estate magnate. My parents listened with rapt attention, nodding and beaming with pride. They asked me a perfunctory question about my job, and when I started to answer, Megan cut in with another, louder story about her own triumphs. It was a classic performance, one I had seen countless times, but today it felt different. It was rehearsed. We sat down to dinner. The table was groaning with food, 2 kinds of potatoes, 3 different pies, a turkey so large it seemed like a statement. It was a feast designed to project abundance and success, a stark contrast to the reality I knew was lurking just beneath the surface. I ate slowly, methodically, a strange calm enveloping me. I was an observer now, a witness to the final act of a play I never auditioned for. My fiancé, Leo, had called me that morning. Just remember you hold all the cards, Em, he'd said. Don't let them make you feel small, you're the strongest person I know. His words were a shield around my heart. Halfway through the meal, just as my father was carving the turkey, Megan picked up her fork and clinked it against her wine glass. The sound was sharp, demanding. The conversation immediately ceased. All eyes turned to her. She pushed her chair back slightly and stood up, a queen addressing her court. I'd like to make a little announcement, she began, a theatrical smile on her face. She swept her gaze around the table, pointedly ignoring me until the very end. As you all know, family is the most important thing to us. It's about support, about being on the same team, about loyalty. She paused for effect, letting the words hang in the air. My father put his carving knife down, his face set in a look of grim resolve. My mother dabbed at her mouth with a napkin, her eyes wide. And for a while now, Megan continued, her voice dripping with faux regret, we've felt that one of us hasn't been holding up their end of that bargain. There's been a certain negativity, a lack of support, a critical eye that frankly none of us need in our lives. I kept my face perfectly neutral, my hands resting in my lap. I could feel her trying to draw a reaction from me to make me angry or defensive. I refused to give her the satisfaction. So, she said, her smile widening into a triumphant beam, we took a vote. Mom, Dad, Mark, and I, we've discussed this at length, and we believe it's for the best. Emilia, She finally looked at me, her eyes cold and hard. "We took a vote and you're officially out of the family." A shocked silence hung in the air for a single heartbeat before it was shattered. Mark began to applaud, a slow, deliberate clap. My father, after a moment's hesitation, joined him. My mother didn't clap, but she nodded. Ed her solemn approval, a look of profound relief washing over her face. "It's nothing personal," Megan said, the lie so blatant it was almost funny. "It's just that we need to protect our own peace. We're on a path to success and happiness, and we can't have anyone dragging us down, so let's raise a glass to moving forward, to a stronger, more unified family." Mark and my father raised their glasses. "To the family," my dad mumbled, his voice thick. I just sat there watching them. I watched them toast to my exile. I watched them smile as they severed the final frayed thread that connected us. They expected tears. They expected me to yell, to protest, to beg. They expected a scene. They had built this whole stage for a drama of their own making. But I wasn't going to play my assigned part. A slow smile spread across my face. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who knew the real ending of the story. Their faces faltered slightly, confused by my lack of distress. I calmly placed my napkin on the table, reached into the handbag at my feet, and pulled out the manila folder. I held the folder in my hands for a moment, feeling the smooth, worn cardboard under my fingertips. The chatter at the table had died down, replaced by a tense, confused silence. My smile remained fixed in place as I looked directly at Megan. "Well," I said, my voice even and clear, resonating in the quiet room, "in that case, this won't be necessary." I leaned forward and gently slid the folder onto the center of the table, placing it next to the platter of half-carved turkey. It sat there, innocuous and plain, yet it seemed to suck all the air out of the room. Megan stared at it, her triumphant expression curdling into suspicion. "What is that?" she asked, her tone sharp. "Some kind of pathetic present, trying to buy your way back in?" "Not at all," I replied softly. "Consider it a parting gift, a memento of our time together as a family." Mark chuckled nervously. "What is it, Amelia? Your secret diary? A collection of all your grievances?" "Something like that," I said. My father looked from me to the folder, a muscle twitching in his jaw. My mother seemed to shrink in her chair, her earlier relief evaporating into pure anxiety. Megan, ever the one to take the bait, reached out and snatched the folder. Her movements were confident, arrogant. She clearly expected to find something sentimental and foolish inside, old photos, perhaps, or a tear-stained letter she could mock. She opened the flap with a flourish, a smirk playing on her lips. The first page on top was a copy of the second mortgage agreement. I watched her face closely. I saw the exact moment her brain processed the words mortgage loan agreement and the names Carol and Richard Jansen. The smirk didn't just vanish, it was wiped away, replaced by a sudden, stark confusion. Her eyes darted from the paper to my parents, who were now staring at her with undisguised panic. Her hands, which had been so steady, began to tremble slightly. She flipped to the second page. It was a summary of the fund transfers from the loan account directly into the account for Megan Jansen Realty, LLC. Her breath hitched. She kept flipping faster now, her arrogance dissolving into a frantic, desperate search. She saw the bank statements showing the extravagant spending. She saw the letters from the lender showing multiple missed payments. And then she saw the official red-stamped document I had seen by the front door, the one I had found a public copy of online, notice of intent to foreclose. The color drained from her face, leaving it a sickly, pale white. She looked up at me, her mouth opening and closing silently like a fish gasping for air. Her eyes were wide with a horror that was just beginning to dawn. What is this?" she whispered, the words barely audible. "It's everything," I said calmly. "It's the second mortgage you had Mom and Dad take out to fund your lifestyle. It's the proof that you've been lying to everyone about your successful business. It's the pre-foreclosure notice that says the bank is going to take this house." My father made a choked sound. My mother put a hand to her chest, her face ashen. Megan shook her head, a gesture of pure denial. She looked back down at the papers, her trembling hands fumbling with the last page in the stack. She turned it over. It was the waiver of inheritance interest. And there at the bottom was my name, crudely forged, highlighted in yellow. That was the moment her smile truly vanished forever. It was replaced by a look of such profound, gut-wrenching terror that it was almost pitiful. The lie was no longer a secret she controlled. It was right there on the table in black and white for everyone to see. She stared at the forged signature, her own fraudulent act, and I saw the last vestiges of her composure crumble into dust. She looked at me one last time, her eye as screaming a question she couldn't bring herself to ask. How? I just met her gaze, my calm expression unwavering. I didn't need to say a word, the folder had said it all. And then the screaming started. It began as a low, guttural sound from Megan, a noise of pure animalistic rage and fear. It quickly escalated into a full-blown shriek. "How could you?" she screamed, her voice cracking. She wasn't looking at me but at our mother. "You were supposed to handle this, you told me it was handled." My mother, Carol, burst into tears, her face collapsing. I didn't know she would find out," she sobbed, turning on my father. "Richard, do something, she's ruining everything." My father, Richard, finally snapped out of his stupor. He stood up so abruptly that his chair scraped loudly against the wood floor. He pointed a trembling finger at me, his face purple with rage. You did this, you spied on us. You went behind our backs to dig up dirt on your own family." "My own family?" I asked, my voice still quiet, cutting through their hysteria. "The one that just voted me out, the one that forged my name to steal my inheritance." The word forged hung in the air like a poisoned dart. Megan flinched as if struck. "That's a lie," she shrieked, slamming the folder shut as if closing it would make the truth disappear. "You can't prove that." "Can I?" I said, my calm unnerving them more than any shouting could. I gestured to the folder. "It's all in there, Megan. The loan documents your business consultant would have told you to get, the transfer records, the foreclosure notice that was sent here weeks ago, the one Mom tried to hide from me, and the waiver. The bank required my signature because I am a legal heir to this property. A handwriting expert will have a very interesting time comparing that signature to my actual one." Mark, Megan's husband, had been silent until now, his face a mask of confusion. He finally seemed to grasp the magnitude of the situation. "Foreclosure," he said, his voice weak. "Megan, what is she talking about? I thought your big deal closed last month." Megan ignored him, her eyes wild with panic. "This is your fault," she screamed at me. "You've always been jealous. You're trying to destroy me because you could never be as successful as I am." The irony of that statement was so thick I could have choked on it. All their accusations were just confessions. They accused me of spying because they had secrets. They accused me of jealousy because they had built a life on lies. They accused me of destroying the family because they had already hollowed it out from the inside. "You don't have to worry about that folder," Megan spat, a desperate, cunning look entering her eyes. She lunged for it, her intent clear. She was going to rip it to shreds, burn it, destroy the evidence. I didn't move, I simply said, "That's just a copy." Her hand froze midair. "The originals," I continued, "are in a safe deposit box. My lawyer has a copy as well. He found it all very interesting, especially the forgery part. He used the word felony several times." The room fell silent again. The word lawyer was the final nail in their coffin. This was no longer a family squabble that could be silenced with screaming and emotional manipulation. I had taken it out of their world and placed it squarely in the real one, a world of consequences and laws. My mother's sobs turned into desperate pleas. "Emilia, please," she begged, reaching a hand across the table. "We can fix this. You can talk to the bank. We're family. You can't do this to us. Think of your father's health. Think of the shame." "Shame," I repeated the word, tasting it. "You weren't thinking about shame when you toasted to my exile 10 minutes ago. You weren't thinking about family when you forged my name on a legal document. You were thinking only of yourselves." I stood up, my movements slow and deliberate. The feast lay abandoned on the table, the food growing cold. The image was perfect, a banquet of lies turning to ashes in their mouths. You wanted me out, I said, my voice resonating with a finality that could not be argued with. You got your wish, you're on your own now. The screaming started up again, a chorus of rage, denial, and pathetic begging. But this time I wasn't listening. The chaos in the dining room was a storm of their own making, and I was in the calm eye of it. Megan had switched tactics from rage to manipulative tears. You're tearing this family apart, Amelia, she cried, mascara running down her cheeks in black rivulets. After everything Mom and Dad have done for you, they gave you a home, they gave you everything. They gave you everything, I corrected her, my voice devoid of heat. They gave you a new car when you crashed theirs, they gave you a private college education, they gave you the family home to leverage for your fake success. And what did they give me? A lecture when? My bike was stolen, a mountain of student debt, and a forged signature on a document stealing my birthright. So please, Megan, do not lecture me about what this family has given me. Every point landed like a stone, creating ripples of stunned silence before the next wave of denial hit. We were going to tell you, my father blurted out, his voice desperate. We were going to pay it all back before you ever needed to know. Megan's business was just about to turn a corner. Was it? I asked, looking him directly in the eye. Is that why you were months behind on the payments? Is that why the bank is foreclosing? You weren't going to tell me, you were going to let them take the house, and you would have blamed it on the economy or bad luck or anything but the truth. And you voted me out of the family tonight to make sure that when it all came crashing down, I would have no moral or legal ground to stand on. You weren't trying to protect me, you were trying to silence me. My mother was now openly begging. Please, honey, don't call your lawyer. We can sell the house. We can pay you back. We'll give you whatever you want. Just don't let this get out. It would kill us. I looked at her, at the woman who had watched my sister wear our grandmother's necklace, the one promised to me and had only offered a weak excuse. The woman who stood by and nodded as I was ceremoniously cast out. What I want, I said slowly, is something you can never give me. I wanted a family that loved me, not for what I could do for them or how quiet I could be, but just me. I've spent 32 years waiting for that, hoping for it. Tonight, you made it very clear that it was never going to happen. I turned my back on her pleading face and looked at my sister, who was now being comforted by her horrified husband. You wanted to be the son, Megan, I said. You got your wish, but sons eventually burn out, and it looks like your time is up. I picked up my handbag from the floor. I didn't look at any of them again. I walked out of the dining room, through the hall where the incriminating letter had first appeared, and toward the front door. Their voices followed me, a tangled mess of threats and pleas, but they sounded distant, like voices from a bad dream I was finally waking up from. As I opened the front door, the cool November air hit my face. It felt clean, fresh. It was the air of freedom. I stepped outside and gently closed the door behind me, cutting off the sounds of my former family's implosion. I walked to my car, my steps feeling lighter than they had in years. I got in, started the engine, and just sat there for a moment in the silence. I had expected to feel a storm of emotions, anger, sadness, maybe even a grim satisfaction. But I felt none of those things. Instead, what washed over me was a profound, bone-deep sense of peace. The weight I had been carrying my entire life, the weight of their expectations, their dismissals, their casual cruelty was gone. They hadn't kicked me out, I had simply finally walked away. As I pulled out of the driveway, I didn't look back at the house full of warm lights and screaming people. I looked forward at the dark, quiet road ahead, and for the first time, it felt like it was leading somewhere I actually wanted to go. In the weeks that followed that Thanksgiving, my phone became a battlefield. I was inundated with calls and texts from my parents and Megan. They came in predictable waves. First came the rage, messages filled with furious accusations and threats of legal action against me for emotional distress. When I didn't respond, the rage dissolved into pleading, tearful voicemails begging me to be the bigger person and help them clean up the mess. Finally, there were the guilt trips. Long, rambling texts from my mother about my father's health and how the stress was going to be the end of him. I listened to the first few, then I blocked their numbers, all of them. Mark, my sister's husband, tried to reach out once, sending me a short formal email asking if a financial settlement could be reached to make this all go away. I sent a one-word reply, no, then I blocked him too. Leo was my rock through it all. He held me when I felt a pang of residual sadness, and he made me laugh when the sheer absurdity of it all threatened to overwhelm me. They voted you out, Em, he reminded me one night as we were decorating our own small Christmas tree. They can't fire you and then get angry when you don't show up for work the next day. News of the fallout trickled back to me through a concerned aunt who lived out of state. The foreclosure had proceeded. The house I grew up in was sold at a bank auction for less than it was worth. My parents had to move into a small rental apartment across town. My aunt said my mother was devastated, not just by the loss of her home, but by the public nature of it. Megan's world had imploded even more spectacularly, her husband. Mark, once he understood the full scope of her financial fraud and the depth of her lies, left her. Her carefully constructed image of success shattered. Without the endless flow of cash from my parents, her business collapsed. The local paper even ran a small story about her real estate license being suspended pending an investigation. The sun, as I had predicted, had burned out. Did I feel satisfaction? For a fleeting moment, perhaps, but it wasn't the satisfying feeling of revenge. It was the grim validation of knowing that the truth, once revealed, had its own momentum. Their downfall wasn't my doing, it was the inevitable consequence of their own actions. I had simply held up a mirror and they had shattered at the sight of their own reflection. My real resolution wasn't found in their ruin, but in my own peace. The holidays were quiet that year, it was just me and Leo. We made our own dinner, we exchanged small, thoughtful gifts, and we sat by the fire talking about our future. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel the familiar holiday dread, the tension of preparing for another performance as the family scapegoat. I just felt calm. I learned that family isn't something you are born into by obligation. It's not a club you can be voted out of. True family are the people who choose you, who see you, who stand by you when you're at your lowest and cheer for you when you find the strength to stand up for yourself. It's the person who holds your hand while you cry, not the one who causes your tears. It's the person who tells you you're strong, not the one who tells you you're difficult. My family now is Leo. It's the close friends who knew my struggle and supported me. It's the future we are building together, a future based on honesty, respect, and a love that is unconditional. I no longer orbit anyone else's star. I am learning to be my own center of gravity, and the world I'm building is brighter and warmer than any I have ever known. So am I the a-hole for revealing the truth that tore my family apart? I don't think so. They had torn it apart long before I opened that folder. I just stopped letting them hide the pieces. After listening to today's story, perhaps it has raised some new questions in your mind. Every day on Reddit, new experiences and moments create fresh stories. We are all human, navigating the complex tapestry of relationships and unforeseen circumstances. The choices people make, for better or for worse, often ripple out in ways they could never predict. If you enjoyed this story, feel free to share it with someone who might appreciate the journey from hurt to healing. Thank you for your time, and don't forget to keep an eye out for more stories coming soon.